This is the Scaling Secrets podcast. Peter Matthies is here from consciousbusinessinstitute.com. And this conscious business movement is what we're going to be talking about today, as well as Peter, who is a former venture capitalist and software entrepreneur. He's worked with Starbucks, he's worked with BMW, Siemens, and Intel, and he is all about building an inspiring, purpose-driven business. So we're going to find out all about some of these concepts like authentic leadership, entrepreneurship with a purpose, combining money with meaning, and so much more. So, Peter, glad to be speaking with you.
Wonderful to be here, Robert. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, and it's wonderful to have you. So we threw out some ideas, concepts, keywords, but in your own words, what are you all about? What's your elevator pitch?
Oh, elevator pitch. I don't have one these days, but what I'm about is that I used to be a venture capitalist, and I saw hundreds and hundreds of organizations every year. And at that time, I was asking many of the entrepreneurs and also many of the employees that I was working with inside of all those organizations as a board member, what they really wanted to do with their life. And to my surprise, many of them said, I really want to do something completely different. I want to make money and then I'm out. Or if I could work in a little different way, that would be fantastic because I'm kind of burning out here. And so over the years, it's become more popular that many people would like to work in a different way. And so I quit in 2003. I quit my home country. I quit my job. I quit my career, came to California and said, I need to find a different way to work and live because I saw that it wasn't sustainable in the way we work. And so at the Conscious Business Institute, we've created another approach to building organization that is just more human-centric, more purpose-driven, and ultimately more successful because people who run these organizations and to work in the organizations that we work with want to be there and want to give their best. So I'm all about building better organizations.
I love it. And that's what we all want to be there. And you hear about some of these phrases like to build a life that you don't need to escape from, that you don't need a vacation one, that ticks all the boxes, that earns you the money, but also scratches the itch and makes you kind of discover your passion. So that way that what you're doing now is not just something you are suffering through, right? It's not just
Right.
a stepping stone, a one of many on the journey. You're actually where you want to be because life is short. There's no guarantee how long we will have on this planet. So we need to make the best of it and not wait until some future date and give up on our dreams now and all those sorts of things. And so what's the before and after look like? Like you mentioned some of these people here that they were unsatisfied in situation A, and then they were happy in situation B. So like, what does that change sort of look like? What is there anyone in particular that you feel like mentioning about how they didn't like the path they were on and then they changed it and it was much better afterwards?
I'll give you a couple of examples. And since it's a scaling podcast here, we're working with organizations that are big, kind of 50,000 employees, but we also work with organizations with 10, 20, 50, or 100 employees. Let me focus on those a little bit. So most of these organizations that we work with, there's somebody in there who says, I want to build an organization that makes money and I don't want to do it in the traditional way. I want to build an organization where people just thrive and where people say, wow, this is freaking cool to work here, where we have a purpose, where we can make a difference, and where we thrive financially. So that combination is sometimes a little tricky to establish, especially in a scaling organization. One question is, how do we build a culture? And how do we maintain a thriving culture when we bring in more people, when we bring in 50 or 100 new people, for example? How can we sustain the culture and the purpose of the organization? And so when we go in, we oftentimes start working with the leadership team first to look at how do you guys need to lead in order to build this kind of an organization? And what's the model that you need to put in place in order to bring it into the entire organization? And then oftentimes, especially in smaller organizations, we take the entire team through our programs in a journey where I always say everybody gets their Mercedes of conscious business. The leaders might get their 600 Mercedes, the other one might just get their entry Mercedes, but everybody gets touched with these new principles. And when that happens, they show up differently at work. For example, suddenly people know their purpose, what they want to create in the world, how they can bring it into the world. Who are they here to be? What's the skill, the talent that brings them, that they can contribute to the world where work is not work anymore? How can they connect to other people and create collaborative environments where people just gel with each other? How can we create a purpose, a why for an entire organization that sticks so that everybody comes to the organization and says, wow, we're really making a dent in the world? And of course, then how do we bring this into the business and make money with that? So if these things come together, then suddenly the energy in the organization just jumps to a different level. And if everybody knows about these approaches, suddenly a common language establishes inside the organization. People say, wow, this is very different than anything I've experienced in organizations before.
And so these topics come up, right? These things about like leadership and having the vision and the values and the culture, it seems like there's kind of the difficulty or the work to be done is there's a plan in place, and then there's like the day-to-day, the implementation. And it seems like just from having a lot of conversations such as this, that you need to have that plan in place. And it's also important to revisit it. That way you don't get off track. And that it is important to kind of keep on revisiting the basics, the fundamentals, the meaning, the real stuff that maybe in the past, maybe it was difficult to revisit the boring because you've already been there. But then if you don't revisit, then you have the gaps in your knowledge, or if you don't go and check again about your culture and your values and your purpose and your passion and all these things, then you kind of fool yourself. So is that on the right track? These two concepts, a concept keeping on trying to bridge the gap between the day-to-day and then the plan, and then also bridging the gap in your knowledge as far as just the basic fundamentals.
There's one third aspect, which is actually the most powerful, which is oftentimes overlooked. So yes, people need a plan. When we provide our methodology of building a more inspiring organizations, which people can find on our website, consciousbusinessinstitute.com, it's a 4-quadrant model that if we build organizations that way, people say, wow, this is what we want to create. There's a model that we can pursue, and then we can build a plan in order to get there. However, we don't want to work more. Everybody is busy enough. We don't want to have additional things that we need to pay attention to every day. That's where the conscious business comes into play, because what we really want to do is transform people's consciousness. Let me give you an example. If some leader thinks they need to push people in order for them to perform, which we can oftentimes see in corporations, right? We need to push them harder. Here's 20% more you need to deliver. They create a culture of fear because you need to push them harder. They need to push hard, and everybody is going, okay, I'm being pushed. That's a very different culture from a leader who has one single different thought, one different consciousness. And the consciousness could be people are inspired and want to make a difference. So suddenly, if I think that if my consciousness is there as a leader, I don't need to push them. I need to inspire them. I need to create a purpose. I need to allow them to create this amazing thing that they want to create. So that's the power of conscious business, because one single thought, it doesn't take any work. It doesn't take a bit of work. But if we have one single different thought, the culture that we create is completely different. So that's the magic in our approaches, really, because oftentimes when we work with organizations, in my own trainings that I've received, it didn't stick. But in our approaches, since we change consciousness with people, and suddenly there's an opening where I say, oh my God, we can create that together. There's no undo button for that. And it doesn't require work because it's just one different thought that leads to a different behavior. Hope that makes sense.
It does. And well, I mean, it's beginning to from me getting this idea for the first time and like kind of digesting it. And so it's what's hitting me is this idea of consciousness is that we can only focus on a handful of things at a time, right? Like you pull your car up to a stoplight and there's all these things happening unconsciously, but they're there because those are kind of long-term habits that have developed for you, right? Like you take your foot off the gas pedal and put it on the brake and put on your turn signal and look at the traffic light and look at other traffic, but consciously you're only looking at a handful of things. So just kind of hearing about this concept of consciously building a business and being conscious of some of these things is that, well, you have this momentum and you have all these things that you may be doing in your business and with leadership and with other people, and that can be good or bad. And we kind of use our consciousness to steer the ship slowly over time and say, hey, I noticed that I'm being a bully or that I'm inspiring this fear. And so I'm consciously going to focus and change this one thing, but knowing that we can only really focus on a few things at any given time. And it takes time to kind of maybe right or steer the ship. And I don't know how on track or off track I am, but that's just what comes to mind as far as this.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. I'll give you one example, and then one worldly example, then I'll tie to business example. If you look at Christopher Columbus, who discovered the United States here in the Americas, basically, that was a business endeavor at that time. So the Spanish crown sent him off, and we need to find different ways to go to India. At that time, everybody thought the earth was flat, right? There was a consciousness the earth is flat. So if you needed to go to India to get new spices and stuff for Spain, you needed to go eastward. Because if you went westward, you would fall off the earth. It wouldn't make sense. Yeah. And then Copernicus came along and said the earth is round. And some people, like Christopher Columbus, believed him. And so he said, if the earth is round, we can actually go westward and go to India. Yes. Again, one single thought, completely different new world opened up for him. And he didn't know what was coming, but suddenly what was developed through this discovery of the Americas for the Spanish crown is incredible. I mean, the new possibilities that appeared for the Spanish crown are unthinkable. And so the same is true for organizations. If we consider most organizations are run, we need to make profits, we need to make margins, and we need to manage people and keep everything on track and need to build a nice team and all those kind of things. But if we actually consider that if we build a human-centric organizations where people truly want to work, where they can give their gifts and talents and everybody is just like, bam, I can bring this here. If we believe that money will follow, and if we can even believe that in critical times, that's a fundamental consciousness shift. Do you know what I mean? So if I lead in a way that I can create this culture and this where everybody just thrives, and this is what we're building with organizations, then suddenly we're opening up a new possibility that people didn't even think was possible before. You know, they knew that something was missing, but there's a new room of possibility where we go, holy shit, now we can really rock the boat here.
And where can this process go wrong? Because you think about these things like changing the culture and having empathy and listening, but sometimes I imagine it could be easy to be superficial and just throw in the ping pong tables in the office or think you're applying leadership, but really you're kind of like being annoying or being too hands-on. So in your experience in seeing the magic and the change that can happen in these organizations, where do they sometimes mess it up? That way we can avoid it and learn from their mistakes before we make them.
Yeah, a great question. Thanks for asking that, because we see it in many organizations that bringing the ping pong tables and the free Greek yogurts and the gym memberships and all those kind of things. And if you look at the statistics, the engagement levels have hardly moved since 20 years. So it's not working. And it's not working because it's not genuine. You know, let's put some ping pong tables in there, but tomorrow we'll push them again to perform harder. So it needs to be genuine. And this is why I speak about this consciousness shift. The consciousness shift needs to be there. If we just put lipstick on a pig and pretend to change our consciousness, but not do it, it's wasted time. It's not going to work out. Yeah. So the magic is to change this consciousness. What can go wrong is, you know, if we don't change the consciousness, we keep doing business as usual and pretend that something is a little different. So I don't think we hurt anybody doing that, but we don't get the breakthrough that is possible. The worst thing that we saw happen is that some people left the organization because they say, you know what, I found my purpose now and I can't live this here anymore. So I'm going to leave the organization, which is oftentimes good because they didn't want to be there in the first place. So what can go wrong? What needs to happen is that people need to be willing to actually try this new path out. And that's why it's very helpful to work with the team instead of just one person, just the leader. Although we start with a leader, we want to work with the entire team and get everybody, a little bit rallied up in this new consciousness so that it's genuine.
So we need to be genuine and actually apply it. Don't just make a small superficial change, but then really deep down in the core, nothing else is different. And so as far as kind of applying this conscious mindset, are there phases to it? Is there like a step-by-step process to getting it done?
Yeah, we've developed a step-by-step process so that it's a tricky business, changing consciousness, right? So we've developed a step-by-step process so that we can actually go into an organization, measure with a software that we have, measure where the organization stands in the model that we have. And then we go into our programs. The first module is about leadership, like how do we need to lead in a different way with authenticity, with genuine care for the people, servant leadership. And then we go into our programs where we said, who are we here to be? What's the self-leadership that's necessary? How do we lead teams in a different way? For example, we have 8 principles that are necessary to build collaborative teams. We have a way to then build a purpose-driven culture in a systematic way. So they go through this learning journey that takes a few months, and then we measure again and see how it changed at the end of the sessions that we have, or maybe post 6 or 12 months later. Yeah, so there's a measurable, systematic, scalable process that we've developed to actually do that.
And what is being measured exactly? Like, is it like a matter of like productivity or like a multiple choice? Like, what is being measured?
We are measuring, we basically cover 4 areas in our approach. One is self-leadership, the other one is building teams, the third one is building a purpose-driven culture, and the fourth one is building business processes and those things so that the company works and rolls. And so in each of these, we have about 12 questions that define what's necessary in those areas, which we've developed with academic research institutions so that the questions actually match.
Wonderful. So these kind of tried and true, proven principles, things that we need to have in place. And of course, there's absolutely room for creativity and personalization and doing things your own way. But you need to have these building blocks in place. That way, there's the servant leadership, and that way, there's the processes, and that way, things run smoothly. And so, speaking of kind of things sometimes going wrong or being unexpected, do you have any sort of surprises that you've experienced in your journey that you feel are worth discussing?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there are oftentimes, especially with people that are not quite ready to make this change, like people who still have rotary phones kind of people, right? Not so many around anymore, but people who are a little more resistant, oftentimes we just need to pay attention how to bring those along, those individuals. So we've developed processes to do that, and we've developed strategies to do that. Oftentimes we work just with the people that are open in the first instance, and then they just pull the other ones along. But it's something to be mindful about when we work with leaders to actually develop those programs, to customize those programs.
And that's one of these subjects where it's easy to forget, but it's so fascinating, this idea of selling the new way of doing things, right? Of getting your heroes, your champions on board. And you see this, you're a software person, you see this with software a lot, right? You roll out this new software to some organization and you know that it might be an uphill battle because easier and it's more comfortable and it's more familiar to continue doing the process the old way with the pencil and paper with the outdated software. And you hear this sometimes about being careful about rolling it out and having a plan, making sure people use it, and like identifying like sort of the connector type of people who can be the evangelist for your new solution. And so that way you can get them on board, and then getting the more like difficult people on board the next step. And then you can kind of tackle one problem at a time until everyone's using this new software solution. And it's easy to forget that, right? It's easy to get lost in the code and the features and forget about the people. And so have you kind of had to do that sometimes, or have you experienced this of just like selling the idea to the employees, that way they actually implement and that way the new solution sticks?
Yeah, it's part of our process. And we don't sell it really, because selling is always like, somebody sells something to me. But here's a nugget which I found very, very helpful is, as leaders, whether we run a small organization or a large one, our job is to touch and inspire other people. And oftentimes I don't see that happening, especially with middle management, because they're managing other people. And people don't want to be managed. So there's always some pushback and some resistance that happen when we manage people. But what we do is we need to lead people. We need to touch and inspire them. And so what we do is, when we just really openly talk about, like, how can we build an organization where you want to work? Like, imagine yourself and we work with you and say, what's the ideal organization that you want to create? It always comes down to the similar things. We want to have fun together. We want to be authentic. We want to fully create something. We want to create something cool. We want to connect genuinely to the people. All those we want to make money. All those kind of things come up. And so the question is then, how can we create this possibility for people? Yeah. And so as we speak about this possibility, we're inspiring the people to actually come on the journey. And our purpose genuinely is to create an environment where people love to work. So we are in it for the people. if we can't get people into the job where they say, oh my God, this is such a rewarding journey to be with Conscious Business Institute and to create this organization together, we are not doing our job. Yeah. We're
Yeah,
not trying to sell anything.
well, yeah, yeah, and so this seems like a more like modern, enlightened way to do things, where like we're more careful and respectful of people and their emotions and their motivation, and that we're all excited to do it. And so this idea that you're mentioning here about like touching and inspiring people to really help us get our heads wrapped around this, is there like a low hanging fruit there? Is there something that leaders these days can do to really touch and inspire, or have you seen like a really good example of like what that looks like?
I would recommend for any leader, for any business owner to ask themselves the question, am I managing or am I inspiring other people? And we will feel quite quickly when we fall into the management thing, where we fall into the inspiring thing. The second thing I recommend to do is for each one, find people that truly inspire us. Like for me, it's a Richard Branson, for example. This guy is just totally inspiring me, the way he runs his organization. So what does he do? He comes into organizations, he's bold, he builds these new things out of the blue. He comes in and creates awesome cultures. He puts people in place who are really good to run the companies. And he's just rocking the boat. And so it starts with a why. It starts, as Simon Sinek says, it starts with our purpose. What's the purpose of this organization? What's the contribution that we are making here? And how can you be a part of that? So I think that's a question that every leader needs to ask themselves. It's not about making money or something. It's like, what's the bigger contribution that we are making with this organization? I'll give you an example. There's one organization that the CEO's purpose is to turn every one of his employees to a millionaire. Yeah, and they do paper clips and stuff. So it's not about changing the world. It doesn't need to be that. But his purpose when he wakes up is that every employee should be a millionaire here so they can live well. And they have a big wall of people that are already turned into millionaires. And so that's the purpose that he's pursuing. Yeah, but
And it seems like this is a common thread in our conversation today, is that what's really important and maybe lacking sometimes is knowing what you want, right? You said start with why. You talk about what do you want your life to look like as far as like your passion? What do you want your company to look like as far as like, this idea of turning your company into a millionaire? So you're saying it's so important to figure out what that dream is, right? What that goal is. And then that way you're not just kind of pushing yourself along, but you're like pushing and pulling, right? Like if you're headed that way, and if you're building towards something, and there's kind of all these kind of like mental tools to get there. And I love kind of what you mentioned there of saying, well, as far as that goal works, who do I want to be like, and who do I really admire, and who do I really want to emulate, such as Richard Branson? And if you can find that sort of role model, then you can read up about them, right? And find out what they did that people say that's great, or read their biography, and not just stay on this superficial level of like reading the motivational quotes or the tweets, but you're saying, I want to do this. Here's someone who's kind of blazed the trail already in a way, and now I can just learn from them and see what they did correctly, and then I can just kind of get towards more in that direction.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And maybe now we're going a little bit more into philosophy here. It's like we all got a few years on this planet here. And I'm not saying that this other approach to just build an organization to make money is wrong. I mean, I don't want to judge it. But I've come to my own crossroads in my life. And I think many people out there do at this time, because we're in such a turmoil in the world. Like, what am I going to do with my years here on this planet? Am I just going to create a new gadget that I'm selling and making some $1 million of it? Fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. I'm more interested in working with organizations where people say, I have a few years. What kind of dent do I want to make into in the world? Because quite frankly, the world is not functioning as it is right now, and it's not sustainable going forward. So what's our contribution in turning this big ship around? What can we do to do that? I write about that in Plan B in the book that I've just published. So people get interested in that.
And I'd love to mention that book and kind of talk about something to get people excited to jump into that. And so one thing real quick that I'm just saying as I'm digesting what you're saying is that there's kind of a right fit, right? As far as the the size or the audacity of your goals, right? Is that
Mhm.
not having a goal or too small a goal, that's bad. But then there's also seems to be the danger in maybe beating yourself up for not wanting to change the whole world, or setting a goal that's so huge, like, well, I want to solve all of world hunger. Well, you on your own will never get there. And so then the goal doesn't really apply or make sense, or it's not based in reality. But if there's something in between, you're saying at least know what you want, and it can be selfish in a way, or it can be kind of a blend of these things, but make this decision about what it is that you want, and stand for something. And I love that. So as far as this whole saving the world idea and plan B, we only have a few minutes left, but as far as just what can be done, you say there's so many things wrong in the world. Is there like a handful or a top 2 or 3 sub elements of this world saving that maybe we really need to pay attention to?
Yeah, I'm not in the game to save the world. The world will be fine. It's really more about humanity's going down the tubes.
Okay.
But the book Plan B speaks about that our current success model is not designed to make us happy. So if we build an organization based on our current success model to do more all the time, to accumulate more stuff, so we become successful, all those kind of things, it is not designed to make us happy. And we can see that in the world that most people struggle with money or with time, right? 95% maybe. If we want to create more inspiring lives, organizations, relationships, we need to rethink the success model. And so what I'm introducing in the book is this alternative success model that many of those people that you probably admire, whether it's an Oprah or Richard Branson, live by, knowingly or not. Yeah. And it's first and foremost to understand who you're here to be. Like, who you are here to be as a human being. What's the expression that you bring into the world? What are the gifts and talents you bring into the world? So if you express that authenticity of yours, then you step into the flow of life and you exit this existing success model where you constantly have to do more. So that's what I speak about in the book. That's probably the biggest shift that we can do to turn this big ship around and build companies in a better way and live just a more inspired and more balanced existence for each and every one of us, whether it's at home, whether it's with our loved ones, or whether it's in the business world.
I love that. And we all should be pursuing that, because happiness is tricky, right? Because you want happiness, but you also want fulfillment, and you also want to make a difference in the world, as we kind of touched on in the very beginning of our conversation. So it's not a straightforward equation. It's kind of a mixed bag, and we want to help people, and we want to figure some of these things out. And as you said, there's a handful of things that people do right. I mean, that's kind of what things like a lot of like organized religion is after, right? They're trying to say, well, here's these rules for living a good life. Or you think about some of these inspiring books like Think and Grow Rich, or these celebrities that we follow, as you said, such as Oprah. We're just always curious about, like, well, clearly Oprah did a lot of things correct, but then there's so many more things that she just like said, this wasn't important, or I'm not going to do. So it helps to kind of look at that template. And so this book is called Plan B, you say?
Plan B, BE for being. Plan B, a professional's guide to authentic success. So it really speaks about that the model that would work for Oprah might not work for you, because it's about authenticity, and there's no Harvard school success model principle that everybody makes everyone successful. It's really to understand who we're here to be, and then to create that into the world. And so it might be different from Oprah that it is for Richard Branson, or for you, or for me. So that's what the book is about, to discover that, and so that we can bring our full selves into the world and be successful with that.
And to me, what seems to make sense is to say, well, I know that I won't be exactly Richard Branson or exactly Oprah, but I can look at some of these recipes and see what works for me, if this or that quality works, or if I connect with like Benjamin Franklin or someone, then I can just kind of look at some of these best practices. And then you said, then kind of figure it out for ourselves and apply it in our own way. And so this is some deep thinking, some deep conversations, some huge problems that we need to be tackling, but that's okay. That's why we're here on a podcast and having these kind of long form discussions, because this is not an easily or instantly solved problem, but the first step is for us to be aware of it and take this inventory and just kind of maybe right the ship in whatever way that needs to be done. So if someone was really impressed by some of these things you said here today about authentic leadership and all the rest, what's the next step here? Like, how can someone contact you, and what would they be contacting you about?
I would suggest the following: to go to consciousbusinessinstitute.com. Look, there's a video on there which outlines the approach, might resonate with you. We have some public programs, Conscious Business Master Program, etc. But the easiest way is to really just start reading the book and take cost a few bucks, and then you know what it's about. There's an online course with it if you want to go deeper. But the best way to get to that is to go to planbe.live, planbe.live.
Wonderful. Planbe.live, and then the Conscious Business Institute is that organization. And as we're wrapping up our conversation here, Peter, instead of just saying goodbye or the end, I always like to put my guests on the spot and ask them about a quote or lesson that has really helped them in their journey as far as scaling their business and finding success. So what comes to mind for you as far as a quote or lesson?
A lesson for me was when I met my mentor, and without knowing me, had never seen me, he talked 3 hours about who I was, who my family was, how I ticked, what I'm here to do in my life. And it completely flushed me that somebody who had never seen me knew me better than I did. And so to consider that we have no idea who we are, and that there's another layer where we can explore, where we go, oh my God, if I could be that, would be the perfect life. To consider that for all of us.
They call that the inner self, right? And so as we're considering that, let's go to consciousbusinessinstitute.com and check out the book Plan B. Peter, it's been fabulous and wonderful speaking with you.
Thanks so much, Robert. Really appreciate it.